Hello everyone, this is the Fifth Epochal Revelation Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, and today is Sunday, September 21st, 2014, and today we're going to study paper 138, Training the Kingdom's Messengers, and that starts on page 1538 in the old book, and the original book, and in the new book it's on paper 13801. Okay, so let's get started here. I'll say a little prayer this morning. Father, thank you for bringing us together this morning, an opportunity to study your wonderful work that you've revealed to us. And we thank you for the opportunity to share this with others and open our hearts and minds that we might understand this and we might share it. We thank you and give you the praise. In your Son's name, Jesus. Amen. Okay, training the kingdom's messengers. How if I start this morning? After preaching the sermon on the kingdom, Jesus called the 6 apostles together that afternoon and began to disclose his plans for visiting the cities around and about the Sea of Galilee. His brothers James and Jude were very much hurt because they were not called to this conference. Up to this time, they had regarded themselves as belonging to Jesus' inner circle of associates. But Jesus planned to have no close relatives as members of his corps of apostolic directors of the kingdom. This failure to include James and Jude among the chosen few, together with his apparent aloofness from his mother ever since the experience at Cana, was the starting point of an ever-widening gulf between Jesus and his family. This situation continued throughout his public ministry. They very nearly rejected him, and these differences were not fully removed until after his death and resurrection. His mother constantly wavered between an attitude of fluctuating faith and hope and increasing emotions of disappointment, humiliation, and despair. Only Ruth, the youngest, remained unswervingly loyal to her father and brother. So Jesus did not include his 2 brothers in the chosen few. Y'all have any idea why he might do this? What'd you say, Rodney?
I could certainly understand that.
Yeah, you can, can't you? Because if he had his own family, his own brothers in the chosen circle, then people would rumor that this is a family thing, right? Rather than him being the Son of God. And so it made perfect sense that he did this. But of course his brothers did not understand this, did they? Not at all. Alright, let's keep going. Diane, would you?
Hey, Raj.
Yeah.
Your video's coming in, but it's out of focus.
Oh, is it?
It is out of focus. And your voice is kind of shaking too, honey.
Yeah, that's probably the connection. Let me see if I can get the video to come in a little bit better here. Sometimes you can get it to focus. Is that any better?
No.
No.
Okay, well there's not much I can do about it then. Let's keep going.
Okay.
Diane, would you read the next one?
Certainly. Until after the resurrection, Jesus' entire family had very little to do with his ministry. If a prophet is not without honor save in his own country, he is not without understanding, appreciation save in his own family.
Okay, so this comes back to where we all know that most people's own family don't appreciate a prophet as he starts his work. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
Yeah, well, another comment, even his chosen apostles, until after the resurrection, they didn't fully believe.
Yeah.
But once the resurrection happened, not only them, but the family was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
This guy was right.
Yeah, this is real, right? That's right.
The real thought.
Yeah, that's all. Understand. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is understandable.
Well, it's understandable because usually after something happens is when the understanding comes. It doesn't always precede the experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's like an artist and some paintings. Once he dies, it's like, wow, that guy knew what he was doing.
Exactly.
Diane,
The final instructions. The next day, Sunday, June the 23rd, AD 26, Jesus imparted his final instructions to the 6. He directed them to go forth, 2 and 2, to teach the glad tidings of the kingdom. He forbade them to baptize and advised against public preaching. He went on to explain that later he would permit them to preach in public. But for a season and for many reasons, he desired them to acquire practical experience in dealing personally with their fellow men. Jesus' purpose to make their first tour entirely one of personal work. Although his announcement was something of a disappointment to the apostles, still they saw, at least in part, Jesus' reason for this beginning the proclamation of the kingdom, and they started out in good heart and with confident enthusiasm. He sent them forth by twos, James and John going to Caricia, Andrew and Peter to Capernaum, while Philip and Nathanael went to Taricia.
Okay. So he didn't want to make this big splash. He had been training them for several months, right? So he wanted them to start out slow so they could get their feet wet, right? Take it very slow and get used to teaching and preaching. Is my video and voice still off, guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me recall you back. I don't want y'all to have to not be able to hear the whole time. See if this works a little better. I'm still got yellow bars. I don't know what's going on. Diane, you back?
I am.
Okay.
And I'm here.
Okay. It's dialing Millie again, but it'll drop out in a minute. Let's keep going. Do you have a video of me?
Yes, sir.
Circling with figures. Okay. Before they begin this first 2 weeks of service, Jesus announced to them that he desired to ordain 12 apostles to continue the work of the kingdom after his departure, authorizing each of them to choose one man from among his early converts for membership in the projected corps of the apostles. John spoke up, asking, "But Master, will these 6 men come into our midst and share all things equally with us who have been with you since the Jordan, and have heard all your teaching in preparation for this, our first labor for the kingdom?" And Jesus replied, "Yes, John, the men you shall choose shall become one with us, and you will teach them all that pertains to the kingdom, even as I have taught you." After thus speaking, Jesus left them. So, think about this. Jesus chose 6 apostles, right? And he trained them for several months. So then he asked them to choose the next 6 apostles, and they were to teach those 6 everything they had learned. Remember in the Urantia Book it says, it talks about the way we learn, and the way they make sure we've learned our lessons is how we teach others the same lessons we just learned. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the way Jesus did it. Okay?
Yeah. And the question that was asked, that John spoke up and asked, the Master, it reminds me of the parable. You still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of the parable when the people were hired to work in the field, and one guy came in. There was only a few hours left to work.
Yeah.
He got the same wage as the other men for that day.
Yeah. Works the same. Works the same way, doesn't it, Rodney?
Yeah.
Those who come later get an equal share, right? All right.
Like the thief on the cross.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
Diane, would you take the next one?
Yes. The 6 did not separate to go to their work until they had exchanged many words in discussion of Jesus' instructions that each of them should choose a new apostle. Andrew's counsel finally prevailed, and they went forth to their labors. In substance, Andrew said, "The master is right. We are too few to encompass this work. There is need for more teachers, and the master has manifested great confidence in us, inasmuch as he has instructed us with the choosing of these 6 new apostles." This morning, as they separated to go to their work, there was a bit of concealed depression in each heart. They knew they were going to miss Jesus, and besides their fear and timidity.
Yeah.
This was not. Wait, pardon me.
They were
This was
timid.
not
They were timid about going out. That's what it means.
right.
Yeah.
This was not the way they had pictured the kingdom of heaven being inaugurated.
They expected some grand thing, didn't they? Instead, it starts very, very slow, and it's not exactly what they expected. Right. Rodney, would you take the next one?
They were still thinking it would be a material kingdom.
Yeah, that's right. Just like, people think Jesus is going to come back in this grand and glorious thing, you know, and that may not be the way he reappears. We don't know for sure,
Yeah, and on a white horse, and
Yeah,
he's going to battle Satan.
that's right.
Okay, it had been arranged that the 6 were to labor for 2 weeks, after which they were to return to the home of Zebedee for a conference. Meantime, Jesus went over to Nazareth to visit with Joseph and Simon and other members of his family living in that vicinity. Jesus did everything humanly possible, consistent with his dedication to the doing of his Father's will, to retain the confidence and affection of his family. In this matter, he did his full duty and more.
So it wasn't because Jesus did not continue to reach out to them, was it? His family, that he had this separation. All right. While the apostles were out on this mission, Jesus thought much about John, now in prison. It was a great temptation to use his potential powers to release him, but once more he resigned himself to wait upon the Father's will. So it wasn't the Father's will to release John, was it?
Obviously, huh?
Yeah, obviously. Choosing the 6. They had other work for John to do in the other worlds, right? So, all right. Diane, would you take the next one, choosing the 6?
Yes. This first missionary tour of the 6 was eminently successful. They all discovered the great value of direct and personal contact with men. They returned to Jesus more fully realizing that after all, religion is purely and wholly a matter of personal experience. They began to sense how hungry were the common people to hear words of religious comfort and spiritual good cheer. When they assembled about Jesus, they all wanted to talk at once, but Andrew assumed charge, and as he called upon them one by one, they made their formal reports to the Master and presented their nominations for the 6 new apostles.
So when they come back, they were excited, weren't they, about what happened, right? All right. Rodney.
Jesus, after each man had presented his selection for the new apostleship, asked all the others to vote upon the nomination. Thus, all 6 of the new apostles were formally accepted by all of the older 6. Then Jesus announced that they would all visit these candidates and give them the call to service.
So that he was very democratic about it, let all of them vote on it, didn't he? All right. The newly selected apostles were 1. Matthew Levi, the customs collector of Capernaum, who had his office just to the east of the city, near the borders of Bethania. He was selected by Andrew. Thomas Didymus, a fisherman of Taquaria, and a one-time carpenter and stonemason of Gadara. He was selected by Philip. James Alphaeus, a fisherman and farmer of Caressa, was selected by James Zebedee. Judas Alphaeus, the twin brother of James Alphaeus, also a fisherman, selected by John Zebedee. Well, there's Pam Pam just came in. We'll see if she wants to join us. Find her here. There we go. Notice that this Judas Alphaeus is not the same Judas Iscariot that basically rebelled against Jesus. Okay. Simon Zelotes was a high officer in the patriotic organization of the Zelotes, a position which he gave up to join Jesus' apostles. Before joining the Zealots, Simon had been a merchant. He was selected by Peter. Judas Iscariot was only son of a wealthy Jewish parents living in Jericho. He had become attached to John the Baptist, and his Sadducees parents had disowned him. He was looking for employment in these regions when Jesus' apostles found him, and chiefly because of his experience with finances, Nathanael invited him to join their ranks. Judas Iscariot was the only Judean among the 12 apostles. So that's the breakdown of the 6. Well, we're having all kinds of issues trying to get people to connect today, aren't we? It's dialing Pam, but I know she's out there. She just come on. Maybe she'll try to dial us. Go ahead, Diane, take the next one.
Okay. Jesus spent a full day with the 6, answering their questions and listening to the details of their reports, where they had many interesting and profitable experiences to relate. They now saw the wisdom of the Master's plan of sending them out to labor in a quiet and personal manner before the launching of their more pretentious public efforts.
Okay, so they all came to the enlightenment of why he did it. 3, the call of Matthew and Simon. Rodney, would you take that one?
Yes. Today, Jesus and the 6 went to call upon Matthew, the customs collector. Matthew was awaiting them, having balanced his books and made ready to turn the affairs of his office over to his brother. As they approached the toll house, Andrew stepped forward with Jesus, who, looking into Matthew's face, said, "Follow me." And he rose and went to his house with Jesus and the apostles.
Didn't take many words, did it? All right, this is a picture of the calling of the apostles. All right. Matthew told Jesus of the banquet which he had arranged for that evening, at least that he wished to give such a dinner for his family and friends if Jesus would approve and consent to be the guest of honor. And Jesus nodded his consent. Peter then took Matthew aside and explained that he had invited one Simon to join the apostles and secure his consent that Simon be also bidden to the feast. All right. Diane.
After a noontide luncheon at Matthew's house, they all went with Peter to call upon Simon the Zealot, whom they found at his old place of business, which was now being conducted by his nephew. When Peter led Jesus up to Simon, the Master greeted the fiery patriot and only said, "Follow me."
Again, many words, right? All right, Rodney, would you take the next one?
Excuse me. They all returned to Matthew's home, where they talked much about politics and religion, imagine that, until the hour of the evening meal. The Levi family had long been engaged in business and tax gathering. Therefore, many of the guests bidden to the banquet by Matthew would have been denominated publicans, and sinners by the Pharisees.
Okay, these were not super religious men, were they? They were considered just the common folk. In those days, when a reception banquet of this sort was tendered a prominent individual, it was the custom for all interested persons to linger about the banquet room to observe the guests at meat and to listen to the conversation and speeches of the men of honor. Accordingly, most of the Capernaum's Pharisees were present on this occasion to observe Jesus' conduct at this unusual social gathering. They wanted to check him out, didn't they? Okay. Diane, would you take the next one?
As the dinner progressed, the joy of the diners mounted to heights of good cheer, and everybody was having such a splendid time that the onlooking Pharisees began in their hearts to criticize Jesus for his participation in such a light-hearted and carefree affair. Later in the evening, when they were making speeches, one of the more malignant of the Pharisees went so far as to criticize Jesus' conduct to Peter, saying, "How dare you teach that this man is righteous when he eats with publicans and sinners, and thus lends his presence to such scenes of careless pleasure-making?" Peter whispered this criticism to Jesus before he spoke the parting blessing upon those assembled. When Jesus began to speak, he said, "In coming here tonight to welcome Matthew and Simon to our fellowship, I am glad to witness your lightheartedness and social good cheer. But you should rejoice still more because many of you will find entrance into the coming kingdom of the Spirit, wherein you shall more abundantly enjoy the good things of the kingdom of heaven. And to you who stand about criticizing me in your hearts, because I have come here to make merry with these friends, let me say that I have come to proclaim joy to the socially downtrodden and spiritual liberty to the moral captives. Need I remind you that they who are whole need not a physician, but rather those who are sick. I have come not to call the righteous, but sinners."
Come to save the world, right? That's exactly right. Rodney, would you take the next one, please? Rodney? You still out there, Rodney?
I'm sorry, I had my mic on.
Okay.
I was just reading along. And truly, this was a strange sight to all Jewry. To see a man of righteous character and noble sentiments mingling freely and joyously with the common people, even with an irreligious and pleasure-seeking throng of publicans and reputed sinners. Simon Zelotes desired to make a speech at this gathering in Matthew's house. But Andrew, knowing that Jesus did not want the coming kingdom to become confused with the Zelotes movement, prevailed upon him to refrain from making any public remarks.
Okay, so Simon Zelotes wanted to make a speech about politics and stuff, right? He had a great audience, so
Oh, yeah.
yeah, the temptation was great. Jesus and his apostles remained that night in Matthew's house, and as the people went to their homes, they spoke of but one thing, the goodness and friendliness of Jesus. The call of the twins. Diane, would you take that one?
Hey, Roger and
Yeah.
Diane, my apology, but I have to leave.
Oh, go right ahead, Rodney, if you need
I need to go get breakfast for everyone, and then we're heading to church.
All right, go right ahead,
It's
Rodney.
wonderful.
We'll see you later. Okay.
It's good to see you guys again.
Good to see you
It's
too.
wonderful to speak to you,
I
Rodney.
love you. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
I love you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Diane, would you take the next one?
Yes. On the morrow, all 9 of them went by boat over to Caesarea to execute the formal
Caressa.
calling of
Caressa, dear.
what? Caressa?
Yeah.
Caressa. Okay. On the morrow, all 9 of them went by boat over to Caressa to execute the formal calling of the next 2 apostles, James and Judas, the twin sons of Alphaeus, the nominees of James and John Zebedee. The fishermen twins were expecting Jesus and his apostles, and were therefore awaiting them on the shore. James Zebedee presented the master to the Carissa, is that Carissa?
Yeah, Caressa.
Fishermen, and Jesus gazing on them, nodded and said, "Follow me."
All right. That afternoon, which they spent together, Jesus fully instructed them concerning attendance upon festive gatherings, concluding with remarks by saying, "All men are my brothers. My Father in heaven does not despise any creature of our making. The kingdom of heaven is open to all men and women. No man may close the door of mercy in the face of any hungry soul, who may seek to gain the entrance thereto. We will sit at meat with all who desire to hear the kingdom. As our Father in heaven looks down upon men, They are all alike. Refuse not, therefore, to break bread with Pharisees or sinners, Sadducees or publicans. Sorry, not Republicans. Publicans.
Not Republican.
Not Republicans. That's probably a good idea, too. Roman or Jew, rich or poor, free or bond. The door of the kingdom is wide open for all who desire to know the truth and find God. So we should sit down with Republicans and Democrats and independents alike, right?
Yes, that is correct.
All right.
That's very cool.
No, we need to take the next
That
one.
night at a simple supper at the Alphaeus home, the twin brothers were received into the apostolic family. I don't know how to pronounce it, I just can't. Later in the evening, Jesus gave his apostles their first lesson dealing with the origin, nature, and destiny of unclean spirits, but they could not comprehend the import of what he told them. They found it very easy to love and admire Jesus, but very difficult to understand many of his teachings. After a night of rest, the entire party...
Stop there, dear. I want to...
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the next paragraph. I wanted to mention the unclean spirits. What are they talking about? They're talking about the rebel midwayers, right?
Right.
He gave them a lesson about the rebel midwayers and what was going on with them. Okay, go ahead.
Now the extreme.
Yeah.
After a night of rest, the entire party, now numbering 11, went by boat over to Terracia.
Yeah. The call of Thomas and Judas. Thomas the fisherman and Judas the wanderer. Isn't that interesting? They call him the wanderer. Met Jesus and the apostles at the fisher boat landing at Terracia. And Thomas led the party to his nearby home. Philip now presented Thomas as his nominee for apostleship, and Nathanael presented Judas Iscariot the Judean for similar honors. Jesus looked upon Thomas and said, Thomas, you lack faith. Nevertheless, I receive you. Follow me. It's the doubting Thomas, right?
Right.
To Judas Iscariot, the master said, Judas, we are all of one flesh, and as I receive you into our midst, I pray that you will always be loyal to your Galilean brother. Follow me. So he already knew his personality, didn't he?
Right.
Okay, and this is a map of them going on their trips around during this period of time, and this is too. You can look at that later. All right, dear, would you take the next one?
Yes. When they had refreshed themselves, Jesus took the 12 apart for a season to pray with them and to instruct them in the nature and work of the Holy Spirit. But again did they largely fail to comprehend the meaning of those wonderful truths which he endeavored to teach them. One would grasp one point and one would comprehend another, but none of them could encompass the whole of his teaching. Always would they make the mistake of trying to fit Jesus' new gospel into their old forms of religious belief. They could not grasp the idea that Jesus had come to proclaim a new gospel of salvation and to establish a new way of finding God. They did not perceive that he was a new revelation of the Father in heaven.
He was a new revelation of the Father in heaven, right? And his teachings on the Holy Spirit, that we know now from the book that the Holy Spirit comes from the local universe Mother Spirit, right?
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to bring that out too. The next day, Jesus left his 12 apostles quite alone. He wanted them to become acquainted and desired that they be alone to talk over what he had taught them. The master returned for the evening meal, and during the after supper hours, he talked to them about the ministry of the seraphim, and some of the apostles comprehended his teaching. They rested for the night, and the next day departed by boat for Capernaum. Notice he only taught them in small amounts at a time, so that they could have time to understand and try to comprehend. And some of them would comprehend some of it, some of them would not, right?
Right.
All right.
Zebedee and Salome had gone to live with their...
Salome, dear.
Who?
Salome?
Salome.
Uh-huh, that's how you pronounce it.
Okay. Zebedee and Salome had gone to live with their son David so that their large home could be turned over to Jesus and his 12 apostles. Here Jesus spent a quiet Sabbath with his chosen messengers. He carefully outlined the plans for proclaiming the kingdom and fully explained the importance of avoiding any clash with their civil authorities, saying, "If the civil rulers are to be rebuked, leave the task to me. See that you make no denunciations of Caesar or his servants." It was this same evening that Judas Iscariot took Jesus aside to inquire why nothing was done to get John out of prison. And Judas was not wholly satisfied with Jesus' attitude.
So this is where he already started.
Exactly.
Right. And notice here he said, do not rebuke the civil leaders. He knew that if he did, then they would be apprehended by the Romans and probably killed promptly, wouldn't they?
Absolutely.
All right. A week of intensive training. The next week was devoted to a program of intense training. Each day the 6 new apostles were put in the hands of their respective denominators for a thoroughgoing review of all they had learned and experienced in preparation for the work of the kingdom. The older apostles carefully reviewed for the benefit of the younger 6 Jesus' teachings up to that hour. Evenings they all assembled in Zebedee's garden to receive Jesus' instruction. Right, dear?
It was at this time that Jesus established the midweek holiday for rest and recreation, and they pursued this plan of relaxation for one day each week throughout the remainder of his material life. As a general rule, they never prosecuted their regular activities on Wednesday. On this weekly holiday, Jesus would usually take himself away from them, saying, "My children, go for a day of play. Rest yourselves from the arduous labors of the kingdom, and enjoy the refreshments that come from reverting to your former vocations, or from discovering new sorts of recreational activity." While Jesus, at this period of his earth life, did not actually require this day of rest, he conformed to this plan because he knew it was best for his human associates. Jesus was the teacher, the master. His associates were his pupils, disciples.
Okay, so he knew that the human mind needed a day of rest each week, didn't he? Okay.
Right.
So the Sabbath, or the day of rest, to him, was for the benefit of his apostles, weren't they?
Right.
Jesus endeavored to make clear to his apostles the difference between his teachings and his life among them, and the teachings which might subsequently spring out about him. Jesus said, "My kingdom and the gospel related thereto shall be the burden of your message. Be not sidetracked into preaching about me and about my teachings. Proclaim the gospel of the kingdom and portray my revelation of the Father in heaven. But do not be misled in the bypass of creating legends and building up a cult having to do with beliefs and teachings about my beliefs and teachings." But again they did not understand and why he thus spoke, and no man dared to ask why he so taught them. And that's exactly what happened in the Christian church, wasn't it, dear?
Right, it was.
They built a religion around the legend of Jesus.
It's very hard.
I'm sorry, dear? Say that again, dear?
No, your voice is very broken up. It may be recording fine, but it's just very broken up, so it's hard for me to hear. But
oh, okay. Let me recall you, dear. Okay.
Okay. All right.
This is crazy today. I've lost her completely now. Sorry it took me so long. I lost you completely after that.
Okay.
All right. You want to take the
I think
next?
it's my turn?
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. In these early teachings, Jesus sought to avoid controversies with his apostles as far as possible, accepting those involving wrong concepts of his Father in heaven. In all such matters, he never hesitated to correct erroneous beliefs. There was just one motive on Jesus' post-baptismal life on Urantia. and that was a better and truer revelation of his paradise Father. He was the pioneer of the new and better way to God, the way of faith and love. Even his exhortation to the apostles was, "Go seek for the sinners, find the downhearted, and comfort the anxious."
Okay, so he always kept to the message about his Father. Jesus had a perfect grasp of the situation. He possessed unlimited power, which might have been utilized in the furtherance of his mission, but he was wholly content with means and personalities which most people would have regarded as inadequate and would have looked upon as insignificant. He was engaged in a mission of enormous dramatic possibilities, but he insisted on going about the Father's business in the most quiet and undramatic manner. He studiously avoided all display of power, and he now planned to work quietly, at least for several months, with his 12 apostles around the Sea of Galilee. So there was nothing flashy about what he was teaching, was it?
No.
Another
It's interesting too with Judas Iscariot that with him, he basically, at the first point regarding John the Baptist, started doubting Jesus. And so he was, like, in his mind entertaining that this man was not true. Whereas the other apostles were leaving it open because they knew that he was had a superior understanding, of course, of what he was teaching.
Yeah.
And so it's that personality flaw in Judas. When we take that with other individuals, we take that with Jesus that he must be wrong or something.
Yeah.
It automatically cancels out your receptivity to the truth.
That's right. It does. All right.
7. Another disappointment. Jesus had planned for a quiet missionary campaign of 5 months personal work. He did not tell the apostles how long this was to last. They worked from week to week. And early on this first day of the week, just as he was about to announce this to his 12 apostles, Simon Peter, James Zebedee, and Judas Iscariot came to have private converse with him. Taking Jesus aside, Peter made bold to say, "Master, we come at the behest of our associates to inquire whether the time is not now ripe to enter into the kingdom. And will you proclaim the kingdom at Capernaum, or are we to move on to Jerusalem? And when shall we learn, each of us, the positions we are to occupy with you in the establishment of the kingdom?" And Peter would have gone on asking further questions, but Jesus raised an admonitory hand and stopped him. And beckoning the other apostles standing nearby to join them, Jesus said, "My little children, how long shall I bear with you? Have I not made it plain to you that my kingdom is not of this world? I have told you many times that I have not come to sit on David's throne. And now how is it that you are inquiring which place each of you will occupy in the Father's kingdom? Can you not perceive that I have called you as ambassadors of a spiritual kingdom? Do you not understand that soon, very soon, you are to represent me in the world and in the proclamation of the kingdom, even as I now represent my Father who is in heaven? Can it be that I have chosen you and instructed you as messengers of the kingdom, and yet you do not comprehend the nature and significance of this coming kingdom of divine preeminence in the hearts of men? My friends, hear me once more. Banish from your minds this idea that my kingdom is a rule of power or a reign of glory. Indeed, all power in heaven and on earth will presently be given into my hands, but it is not the Father's will that we use this divine endowment to glorify ourselves during this age. In another age, you shall indeed sit with me in power and glory, but it behooves us now to submit to the will of the Father and to go forth in humble obedience to execute his bidding on earth."
They didn't realize they were going to go on with their lives in an ordinary manner, teaching and preaching, did they? They expected this miraculous thing to happen, and they'd be in charge of large things, and they'd all have these glorious lives, rather than be humble servants that would die for the kingdom itself, did they? So, once more were all his associates shocked and stunned. Jesus sent them away two and two to pray, asking them to return to him at noontime. On this crucial afternoon, they each sought to find God, and each endeavored to cheer and strengthen each other, and they returned to Jesus as he had bidden them. Okay?
Jesus now recounted for them the coming of John, the baptism in the Jordan, and marriage feast at Cana. the recent choosing of the 6 and the withdrawal from them of his own brothers in the flesh, and warned them that the enemy of the kingdom would seek also to draw them away. After this short but earnest talk, the apostles all arose under Peter's leadership to declare their undying devotion to their master and to pledge their unswerving loyalty to the kingdom, as Thomas expressed it. To this coming kingdom, no matter what it is, and even if I do not fully understand it. They all truly believed in Jesus, even though they did not fully comprehend his teaching.
Okay, so they all believed in him even though they had no concept of what they were getting into, did they? Jesus now asked them how much money they had among them, and also inquired as to what provisions had been made for their families. When it developed that they had hardly sufficient funds to maintain themselves for 2 weeks, he said, "It is not the will of my Father that we begin our work in this way. We will remain here by the sea 2 weeks and fish, or do whatever our hands find to do. In the meantime, under the guidance of Andrew, the first chosen apostle, you shall organize yourself as to provide for everything needful in your future work, both for the present personal ministry, and also I shall subsequently ordain you to preach the gospel and instruct believers." Though we're all greatly cheered by these words, this was their first clear-cut and positive intimation that Jesus designed later on to enter upon a more aggressive and pretentious public work. So he told them that they needed to have some funds together first, and then he would ordain them and they would move forward. Okay? Diane, would you take the next one?
Yes. The apostles spent the remainder of the day perfecting their organization and completing arrangements for boats and nets for embarking on the morrow's fishing, as they had all decided to devote themselves to fishing. Most of them had been fishermen. Jesus was an experienced boatman and fisherman. Many of the boats which they used the next few years had been built by Jesus' own hands, and they were good and trustworthy boats.
All right, so they went back to fish. Jesus enjoined them to devote themselves to fishing for 2 weeks, adding, "And then will you go forth to become fishers of men." They fished in 3 groups, Jesus going out with a different group each night, and they all so much enjoyed Jesus. He was a good fisherman, a cheerful companion, and an inspiring friend. And the more they worked with him, the more they loved him. Said Matthew one day, "The more you understand some people, the less you admire them. But of this man, even the less I comprehend him, the more I love him." Right here.
This plan of fishing 2 weeks and going out to do personal work on behalf of the kingdom for 2 weeks was followed by more than 5 months, even to the end of this year of AD 26, until after the cessation of those special persecutions which had been directed against John's disciples subsequent to his imprisonment.
8. First work of the 12. After disposing of the fish catches of 2 weeks, Judas Iscariot, the one chosen to act as treasurer of the 12, divided the apostolic funds into six equal portions, funds for the care of dependent families having already been provided. And then near the middle of August in the year AD 26, they went forth 2 by 2, to the fields of work assigned by Andrew. The first 2 weeks Jesus went out with Andrew and Peter, the second 2 weeks with James and John, and so on with the other couples in the order of their choosing. In this way he was able to go out at least once with each couple before he called them together for the beginning of their public ministry. Dear?
Jesus taught them to preach the forgiveness of sin through faith in God without penance or sacrifice, and that the Father in heaven loves all his children with the same eternal love. He enjoined his apostles to refrain from discussing
The 3. Go ahead and do the 3.
Okay. 1. The work and imprisonment of John the Baptist. 2. The voice at the baptism. Jesus, "Only those who heard the voice may refer to it. Speak only that which you have heard from me. Speak not hearsay." 3. The turning of the water into the wine at Cana. Jesus seriously charged them, saying, "Tell no man about the water and the wine."
Okay. A couple things that's in this paragraph I want to bring out. Number one, Jesus taught them to preach forgiveness of sin and faith in God without penance or sacrifice. So no penance and no sacrifice is needed for God's favor, right? Forgiveness is a gift of God through faith. That's the first thing. Okay, then he enjoined them not to discuss the three things. He didn't want them to discuss the imprisonment of John because that was a political matter, right? And then the other thing is he didn't want them to get in the habit of repeating things that they are not sure actually happened. So he only said those who heard the voice in the water at his baptism could speak of it, no one else. And then, of course, he did not want anybody to continue on with the story of the water and wine because it's just a miracle. And then that's not what he wanted the kingdom based on, right? They had wonderful times these 5 or 6 months during which they worked as fishermen every alternate 2 weeks, thereby earning enough money to support themselves in the field for each succeeding 2 weeks of missionary work for the kingdom.
The common people marveled at the teaching and ministry of Jesus and his apostles. The rabbis had long taught the Jews that the ignorant could not be pious or righteous. But Jesus' apostles were both pious and righteous. Yet they were cheerfully ignorant of much of the learning of the rabbis and the wisdom of the world.
Jesus made plain to his apostles the difference between the repentance of so-called good works as taught by the Jews and the change of mind by faith, the new birth, which he required as the price of the admission to the kingdom. He taught his apostles that faith was the only requisite to entering the Father's kingdom. John had taught them repentance to flee from the wrath to come. Jesus taught faith is the open door for entering into the present perfect and eternal love of God. Jesus did not speak like a prophet, one who comes to declare the word of God. He seemed to speak of himself as one having authority. Jesus sought to divert their minds from miracle seeking to the finding of a real and personal experience in the satisfaction and assurance of the indwelling of God's Spirit of love and saving grace. So his whole message was about the relationship individually with the Father. Nothing else. Right? All right. Diane?
The disciples early learned that the Master... Pardon me?
I didn't say anything.
The disciples early learned that the Master had a profound respect and sympathetic regard for every human being he met, and they were tremendously impressed by this uniform and unvarying consideration which he so consistently gave to all sorts of men, women, and children. He would pause in the midst of a profound discourse that he might go out in the road to speak good cheer to a passing woman laden with her burden of body and soul. He would interrupt a serious conference with his apostle to fraternize with an intruding child. Nothing ever seemed so important to Jesus as the individual human who chanced to be in his immediate presence. He was master and teacher, but he was more. He was also a friend and neighbor, an understanding comrade.
So every single person he met was important to him, right? Though Jesus' public teaching mainly consisted in parables and short discourses, he invariably taught his apostles by questions and answers. He would always pause to answer sincere questions during his later public discourses.
The apostles were at first shocked by, but early became accustomed to Jesus' treatment of women. He made it very clear to them that women were to be accorded equal rights with men in the kingdom.
So I guess you could say Jesus was the first women's liber, wouldn't he? He wanted to make women equal with men. Right.
Probably God, but
Yeah. 5 months of training. This somewhat monotonous... Is it my turn or your turn, dear?
Go ahead.
This somewhat monotonous period of alternate fishing and personal work proved to be a grueling experience for the 12 apostles, but they endured the test. With all their grumblings, doubts, and transient dissatisfactions, they remained true to their vows of devotions and loyalty to the Master. It was their personal association with Jesus during these months of testing that so endeared him to them, and they all, save Judas Iscariot, remained loyal and true to him even in the dark hours of trial and crucifixion. Real men simply could not actually desert a revered teacher who had lived so close to them and had been so devoted to them as had Jesus. Though the dark hours of the Master's death, through the dark hours of the Master's death, in the hearts of these apostles, all reason, judgment, and logic were set aside in deference to just one extraordinary human emotion, the supreme sentiment of friendship loyalty. These 5 months of work with Jesus led these apostles, each one of them, to regard him as the best friend he had in all the world. And it was this human sentiment and not his superb teachings or marvelous doings that held them together until after the resurrection and the renewal of the proclamation of the gospel of the kingdom. So each and every one of them, with the exception of Judas, felt that Jesus was his best friend. Okay? Diane?
Not only were these months of quiet work a great test to the apostles, a test which they survived, but the season of public inactivity was a great trial to Jesus' family. By the time Jesus was prepared to launch forth on his public work, his entire family, except Ruth, had practically deserted him. On only a few occasions did they attempt to make subsequent contact with him, and then it was to persuade him to return home with them, for they came near to believe he was beside himself. They simply could not fathom his philosophy nor grasp his teaching. It was all too much for those of his own flesh and blood.
They thought he was crazy, didn't they?
It would have been really difficult if they felt that way and they were one of his apostles, so he must have already known that in addition to everything else.
Yeah, that's true. The apostles carried on their personal work in Capernaum, Bethsaida, Julias, Chorazin, Caressa, Hippos, Magdala, Cana, Bethlehem of Galilee, Joppapada, Ramah, Zephed, Geshela, Gadara, and Abela. Besides these towns, they labored in many villages as well in the countryside. By the end of this period, the 12 had worked out fairly satisfactory plans for the care of their respective families. Most of the apostles were married, some had several children, but they had made such arrangements for the support of their home folks that with some little assistance from the apostolic funds, they could devote their entire energies to the Master's work without having to worry about the financial welfare of their families. So they still made sure that the families were taken care of.
Right.
Organization of the 12. Let me read the first part. The apostles early organized themselves in the following manner. You want to take it from there, dear? The first 5?
1. Excuse me?
Go ahead and take the first 5.
And the first chosen apostle was designated chairman and director general of the 12. 2. Peter, James, and John were appointed personal companions of Jesus. They were to attend him day and night, to minister to his physical and sundry needs, and to accompany him on those night vigils of prayer and mysterious communion with the Father in heaven. How many do you want me to read?
Yeah, go on through 5.
Okay. 3. Philip was made steward of the group. It was his duty to provide food and to see that visitors, even the multitude of listeners at times, had something to eat. 4. Nathanael watched over the needs of the families of the 12. He received regular reports as to the requirements of each apostle's family, and making requisition on Judas, the treasurer, would send funds each week to those in need. 5. Matthew was the physical agent of the apostolic corps. It was his duty to see that the budget was balanced, the treasury replenished. If the funds for mutual support were not forthcoming, if donations sufficient to maintain the party were not received, Matthew was empowered to order the 12 back to their nets for a season. But this was never necessary after they began their public work. He always had sufficient funds in the treasurer's hands to finance their activities.
Many of which he added himself, right?
That's right.
The other thing is Peter, James, and John. These are the ones that would accompany Jesus on all these vigils where he would talk to celestial beings too, right? So he saw quite a bit go on. Thomas was manager of the itinerary. devolved upon him to arrange lodgings and in general way select places for teaching and preaching, thereby assuring a smooth and expeditious travel schedule. James and Judas, the twin sons of Alphaeus, were assigned to the management of the multitudes. It was their task to deputize a sufficient number of assistant ushers to enable them to maintain order among the crowds during the preaching. Simon Zelotes was given charge of recreation and play. He managed the Wednesday programs and also sought to provide for a few hours of relaxation and diversion each day. Judas Iscariot was appointed treasurer. He carried the bag. He paid all expenses and kept the books. He made budget estimates for Matthew from week to week, and he also made weekly reports to Andrew. Judas paid out funds on Andrew's authorization. That's why Judas was carrying the bag the night he dropped it with them. All right, dear, would you take the next one?
In this way, the 12 functioned from In this way, the 12 functioned from their early organization up to the time of the reorganization made necessary by the desertion of Judas, the betrayer. The Master and his disciple apostles went on in this simple manner until Sunday, January 12, AD 27, when he called them together and formally ordained them as ambassadors of the kingdom and preachers of its glad tidings. And soon thereafter they prepared to start for Jerusalem and Judea on their first public preaching tour.
So this is the day of the ordination, and that was the end of the paper. The next one will be the 12 apostles, right? So let's say a little prayer, and we'll close for today. Diane, would you pray for us, dear?
Yes, thank you, Father, for the reading of this very important paper describing each of the personalities and their particular work that they were designed to fulfill for Jesus's ministry. We just thank you for this understanding that comes as a result of reading and studying the papers in the Urantia Book, and we thank you for Roger and his commitment and dedication to teaching the Urantia Book. It is in your name, Jesus, Christ Michael of Nebadon, we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Amen. Thank you for joining us, folks. Please come see us again. God bless you.